For centuries, we've been handed stories polished by motion, shaped by power, and repeated until myth began to sound like memory. But beneath the dust of exaggeration lies a truth far more unsettling and far more powerful. This is where we strip away the legends, confront the distortions, and rebuild history from evidence, not echo. Welcome to the Missing Dots, where every narrative is interrogated, every assumption is challenged, and nothing is accepted without proof. Sitting here today, just taking a moment to reflect after prayer, the courtyard is so quiet right now.
Yeah, it really is peaceful.
It puts you in a certain state of mind, I think. You start thinking about time and about memory, and really about the stories that shape who we are. And I'm really glad you're here with us for this conversation, talking directly to you listening.
Good to be here.
Because today we are looking into something truly monumental. We're talking about the tragedy of Karbala, which took place on the 10th of Muharram in the year 61 AH, or 680 CE.
Right. A profoundly defining moment.
Exactly. But before we actually started recording, I was looking through this massive stack of sources we gathered for today. We have translations of these, like 9th century Arabic chronicles sitting right side by side with 16th century Persian poetry. And then we have these modern critiques by traditional Islamic scholars.
It is quite a contrast when you put them all next to each other on the table like that.
It really is.
The tone, the specific details, literally everything shifts depending on which century you happen to be reading.
Yeah, and looking at those early texts compared to the later poetry, I just kept thinking about how history works over a 14th century timeline.
Right, it gets layered.
Layered, yeah. It feels almost like looking at an old, sturdy stone building. The original structure is solid, It's made of hard, immovable facts. But over hundreds of years, ivy starts to grow on it.
That's a great image.
And eventually, the ivy just covers every single stone. It gets so thick and so lush that people standing in front of the building, they actually start believing the ivy is the building itself. They totally forget there is stone underneath.
That is honestly a brilliant way to visualize it. And what makes this particular history so fascinating is that we don't have to just guess what the original building looked like.
Right, we have the records.
Exactly. We can actually trace the exact decades when that ivy started to grow over the stone.
Oh, wow. So we know when it happened.
Yes, we do. If you look at the earliest stratum of historical memory, so the records from the 1st to the 3rd centuries after the event, the building is bare stone. It is incredibly lean.
So what do those early records actually look like? Like, who was even writing this down back then?
Well, the earliest major collector of eyewitness accounts was a man named Abu Miknaf.
Abu Miknaf.
Right. He died around 157 AH, and his work was heavily preserved by the famous historian Al-Tabari in his really sweeping chronicles.
Al-Tabari.
Yeah. And Abu Miknaf was essentially an investigative historian. He tracked down actual survivors.
Like people who were there on the ground.
Yes. People who were physically present at Karbala, or he interviewed their immediate children. And when you read his accounts preserved in Al-Tabari, you don't find this soaring poetry or, supernatural cosmic events. You find troop movements.
So it reads more like military dispatches.
Exactly like clinical dispatches. You read about intelligence gathering, administrative letters passing back and forth between the Umayyad governors, and very tactical battlefield decisions.
Wow.
The focus is entirely on the physical and the political reality of the 7th century. Nothing more.
Okay, but what about the numbers? Because, the numbers I hear recited today, the ones that literally bring thousands of people to tears, they are astronomical. I mean, I've heard stories of millions of soldiers.
I know. But in the early records, the numbers reflect pure logistical reality. Hussein's camp is small. He had perhaps 72 fighting companions with him.
Just 72.
Just around 72. And the opposing Umayyad force, commanded by Umar ibn Saad, is estimated at perhaps 4,000, maybe up to 30,000 men, depending on the specific early source you look at.
Still a vastly unequal fight, obviously.
Absolutely, it was a massacre, but the numbers are human. They are logistically possible to feed and water and assemble in the region of Kufa at that specific time in history.
It's just mind-boggling that people eventually accepted numbers like 300,000 casualties.
Yeah.
As a historical fact.
It is.
But, history doesn't just rewrite itself by accident, right? How did we get from a lean, factual military account to the theatrical epics we hear recited today?
Well, to find where the narrative dramatically shifted, you have to jump forward over 800 years.
800 years? That is a massive jump.
It is. You have to look at the Safavid and Qajar eras in Iran. Specifically, there is a book written in 1502 CE by a scholar named Hussein Kashifi.
Okay, Kashif.
And the book is called Radat al-Shuhada, which translates roughly to the Garden of the Martyrs.
1502. So we're talking about more than 8 centuries after the actual event. That is just, a total rupture in the timeline.
That a complete rupture. And you have to understand, Kashifi was not a historian trying to preserve military facts.
Right. He was writing highly stylized Persian prose and poetry. His primary goal was to evoke maximum emotional sorrow from the reader.
Ah, I see.
This is exactly where we see the introduction of details that simply do not exist anywhere in the early Arabic sources.
Like what kind of details did he actually add?
Well, things like the battlefield wedding of Qasim, who was Hussein's young nephew.
A wedding. In the middle of a battle.
Yes, the idea that a wedding was held in the middle of this desperate, bloody military siege just to heighten the tragedy of his death shortly after.
Wow.
Or those impossible numbers you mentioned earlier, claims that Hussein personally killed 300,000 soldiers in a single afternoon while severely dehydrated.
Which is, mathematically impossible, even if a person didn't sleep and just swung a sword nonstop for 24 hours.
It completely defies physics. Kashifi also introduced these massive cosmic phenomena like blood raining from the sky globally or wild lions coming out of the desert to protect the bodies of the fallen.
Oh, wow. So really leaning into the supernatural. Exactly. And perhaps most noticeably, he and the writers who followed him introduced these incredibly long, cinematic, rhyming dialogues.
Rhyming dialogue.
As speeches spoken right in the middle of intense sword combat.
I've always found that part so puzzling, honestly. I'm just trying to picture the logistics of a 7th century battle.
It doesn't make sense.
The dust, the chaos, the sheer physical exertion. It's a desperate melee. Who is sitting there with a quill and parchment taking notes on a rhyming poem?
No one is.
So how did people start accepting these highly stylized speeches as archival facts?
Well, they are what literary scholars call retrojective exegesis.
Wait, let's slow down and break that down. Retrojective exegesis. So it's basically reverse engineering a historical script.
Yes, exactly.
Like taking a modern, beautifully written Shakespearean monologue and pretending Julius Caesar actually said it on the battlefield.
That is a perfect analogy. Later poets wrote beautiful, tragic poetry and simply placed it backward into the mouths of historical figures. But your question about why people accepted it, that is the key to all of this. They accepted it because the changes weren't just innocent storytelling mistakes. They were driven by very powerful sociopolitical pressures at the time.
Okay, so what was going on in the 16th century that made people need this brand new version of the story?
It essentially comes down to state building. In the 16th century, the Safavid dynasty took power and made 12-verse Shi'ism the official state religion of their empire.
Okay.
Now, look at their geography. They were bordered by the massive Sunni Ottoman Empire. The Safavids needed to create a distinct, unified confessional identity for their people.
To stand out.
Yes. They needed something that separated us from them. So Karbala became a state-sponsored symbol to achieve that.
So it became a national PR tool, in a way. They needed a narrative that would bind their incredibly diverse population together through this, shared emotional intensity.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
And that state sponsorship led to what we can call the economics of grief.
The economics of grief. That's a heavy phrase.
It is. The Safavid state, and later the Qajar state, institutionalized public mourning. They created elaborate passion plays called taziyeh.
Right.
They also created Rada Kwani, which literally means reciting from Kashifi's book, the Rada al-Shuhada. It actually became a profession.
Yeah.
And this created a deeply problematic incentive structure.
Because the reciters were getting paid based on the audience's reaction, right?
Yeah.
Like if the audience didn't cry, the reciter didn't get invited back by the court.
Exactly. Reciters were patronized by the local elite and the public. Their livelihood depended entirely on their ability to make the audience weep. So picture this marketplace.
Okay.
If you are a professional reciter and last year someone else made the whole town cry with a really sad story, how do you compete this year?
You have to escalate. You have to invent something worse. It's a spiritual arms race.
That's exactly what it was.
You know, if you are listening to this right now and wondering why 16th century passion plays matter to your life today, just think about how we consume media and news right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We are naturally drawn to stories that maximize our outrage and our sorrow over stories that just give us dry, tactical facts. The algorithm today works just like the town square back then.
It is the exact same psychology. It is an emotional contagion loop. To keep the tears flowing year after year, the reciters had to keep escalating the trauma.
So they add more tragedy.
Yes, you add more innocent victims, you exaggerate the physical suffering to unimaginable levels, you introduce supernatural interventions to make the loss feel cosmic,
Right.
and you flatten the opposing army into pure demonic villains rather than complex political actors. The audience's tears validate the story, so the story just keeps expanding.
I have to push back here, though, just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at human nature, if these fabricated stories are what successfully kept the memory of Hussein alive for 800 years in these communities, isn't there an argument that the ends justify the means?
People have made that argument.
Right, because if it makes people feel a deep spiritual connection, what is the actual harm? Did anyone at the time actually stand up and say this was wrong?
They did. People did stand up, and they did so fiercely. And honestly, this is perhaps the most important part of our conversation today.
Okay.
The effort to clean up this history, to prune back that ivy we talked about, it is not a modern secular attack coming from outside the tradition. It is a deeply traditional internal Islamic effort.
Oh, really? So the pushback came from within the religious scholarship itself?
Absolutely. The scholars who condemned these fabrications are some of the most respected figures in the tradition.
Like who?
Consider Mirza Hussain Nuri in the late 19th century. He wrote a book called Lulu wa al-Marjan, which was just a devastating, unapologetic critique of the professional reciters.
Wow.
Nuri forcefully condemned that exact ends justify the means logic you just mentioned.
So he argued that you can't build religious devotion on a foundation of falsehood.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
For him, lying is a major sin, period. And lying about history to make people cry is still lying.
Right, it doesn't matter what the goal is.
Exactly. And later in the 20th century, you have Ayatollah Murtada Motahari, who delivered a famous series of lectures called Hamasi-e-Hosseini, or the Epic of Ashura, where he took this critique even further.
Just on a lot. I mean, just think about the courage that takes. Imagine standing up in front of your own community, people who are deeply invested in this grief, and telling them that the stories their grandparents wept over are actually recent inventions.
It takes profound intellectual and moral courage. What Motahari and Nuri did was apply the rigorous criteria of traditional Islamic sciences to this specific history.
How so?
They treated these folklore stories the exact same way a strict scholar treats a hadith, a saying of the prophet.
Okay, so how does that process work? How do they actually audit a story from centuries ago?
Well, they look at the chain of transmission. Who told this to whom, and were they actually alive to see it?
Makes sense.
They also perform textual analysis. They look for anachronisms. If a story mentions a weapon or a specific title that didn't even exist in the 7th century, it is discarded immediately.
It's like finding a historical document about the Roman Empire, where someone is checking their wristwatch.
That's a perfect example. And they also check for logistical impossibilities, like the claim we discussed earlier of one man fighting hundreds of thousands of people.
It really goes back to a core principle, doesn't it? The Quranic prohibition against mixing truth with falsehood.
Yes. Do not mix truth with falsehood or conceal the truth knowingly. For these scholars, textual hygiene is not just a historical preference. It is a strict religious obligation.
But I'm still curious about Motahari's main concern. Beyond just the factual inaccuracy, why was he so deeply worried about these exaggerated stories? What was the deeper danger there?
His deepest fear was what these fabricated stories did to the actual meaning of the event.
The meaning.
Yes. In Islamic scholarship, there is a distinction between tarif al-lafzi, which is distorting the words or the details, and tarif al-manawi, which is distorting the core meaning.
Okay, so if you change enough facts, eventually you change the entire lesson.
Exactly. Let us look at the historical Hussein, the one we find in the early barestone records of Abu Miknaf.
Right, the early sources.
That Hussein was a calculating, strategic political sovereign. He saw systemic corruption under the Umayyad ruler Yazid.
He recognized the political reality.
Yes, and he utilized intelligence gatherers. He wrote political manifestos outlining his goals for justice and reform, a concept called Islah.
Islah, right.
He made very tactical choices. He refused an illegitimate oath of allegiance, knowing full well the physical risks, but he chose a principled resistance anyway.
He was a man with agency. He was making choices based on a clear political and moral philosophy.
Exactly. But the later legends completely transformed him. To make the story as sad as possible, the legends stripped away his agency.
Oh, I see.
They turned him into a helpless, passive victim who was just marching blindly to a preordained slaughter, simply to suffer, extract tears from the audience, and secure intercession for his followers in the afterlife.
Wow. It's incredible when you think about it. By giving them supernatural powers and by portraying them as helpless victims of this cosmic destiny, we've actually robbed them of their courage.
We really have.
Because true courage isn't a supernatural being who feels no pain, and it isn't a helpless person forced into a situation they have absolutely no control over. True courage is a human being, feeling fear, facing impossible odds for the sake of justice, and choosing to stand anyway.
That is the absolute essence of Motahari's critique. By turning Karbala into a ritual of passive survival, the community loses its blueprint for justice.
That is so powerful.
If the heroes of Karbala are just supernatural beings acting out a cosmic script, then we cannot emulate them. All we can do is sit and weep for them.
And that shift in meaning, it changes how everyone in the story is viewed. I think about the women in this history. Because history so often flattens women into emotional caricatures, and it sounds like the Passion Plays did exactly that here too.
Very much so. In the folk stories and the Tazia Passion Plays, the women of the family, especially Hussein's sister Zainab, are almost entirely portrayed as shrieking, helpless victims.
Just there to cry.
Right. Their only apparent role in the drama is to tear their hair, cry, and express agony.
Which, again, is clearly designed to make the audience cry, but it completely erases who she actually was.
The historical reality is entirely different. Zainab and the other women were resilient, articulate political communicators.
Really?
Yes, Hussein deliberately brought them on the journey because he knew the political reality. He knew that after the military confrontation, the Umayyad state would try to control the narrative and label them as mere rebels.
So he needed witnesses.
He needed survivors who could speak and bear witness.
But she did speak.
She did. She was taken as a captive to the courts of the governor in Kufa and later to Yazid himself in Damascus.
Right into the center of power.
Yes, and in those courts, surrounded by military power, she delivered devastating, intellectually rigorous speeches that completely dismantled the regime's propaganda.
Wow.
She preserved the ideology of the movement. She was not a passive victim weeping in the background. She was the political continuation of the uprising.
Alhamdulillah. It changes everything when you see it that way. When you strip away the theater and the ivy, you aren't left with less. You're left with so much more. You're left with human dignity.
The historical core is infinitely more stable, and it is universally inspiring. But, there's a catch.
Oh, what's the catch?
When you remove the millions of fictional soldiers and the bleeding skies, the raw history that remains is actually far more intimidating.
Intimidating. Why is the truth harder to handle than the myth?
Because it asks a much harder question of us today. It is very easy to sit in a gathering and weep for a supernatural martyr who suffered a cosmic predestined tragedy.
Right. It feels good, emotionally.
Exactly. That requires nothing of you except a moment of emotion. But it is much, much harder to look at a historically real human being.
A real person making choices.
Someone who stood against systemic political corruption, who refused to accept the normalization of tyranny, and who paid the ultimate price for his principles.
Because if you look at that real human being, you have to look at yourself. You listening right now, you have to ask, where in my own life am I quietly accepting injustice because it's simply easier than standing up?
Yes.
Where am I compromising my principles just to get by in my career or, in my community?
Precisely. The true legacy of Karbala is not about passive grief. It is about active reform. It is about having the moral sovereignty to recognize corruption and the courage to say no.
That is heavy.
When we let go of the comforting myths, we are left with a historical reality that demands action from us in the present. It holds a mirror up to our own choices.
And that is a weight we all have to carry. It's a lot to think about, really, but it's a conversation we need to keep having. To rebuild your mental peace and legacy today, give charity, sponsor a student, and plant a tree. May Allah grant us success. Don't forget to salute the Humul Sari. Come on, let's go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.